Hey everyone, 2 years ago Xiaomi ignited a war against bezels with their first Mi Mix. Ever since, bezels have been melting away across the entire industry, and so has the space for the selfie camera. And quite a few interesting implementations have been presented for how to deal with the lack of space. But I think this one is probably the most fun to date, because snap and you have a camera, snap and you don't. But fun aside, how does the Mi Mix 3 compare to other flagships released in recent months? I'm Angie for GSM Arena, and this is our Mi Mix 3 review. The first thing you notice about this phone is the screen. It's not just because of the minimal bezels and the incredibly clean looks. The screen itself is noticeably crispier than last year, even though it has the same pixel density as before. Even at a glance, you can tell the panel itself is clearly a higher quality one, and it's not just because the Mix now has an AMOLED display and the lovely blacks that come with it. For one, it can get up to 630 nits of max brightness when in automatic brightness, and up to 430 when you manually adjust it. For another, the display is near the top of its class for sunlight legibility, and when you switch from automatic to standard contrast mode, it's also very color accurate. Audio is also pretty solid. The single bottom-firing speaker scored a good rating on our loudness tests, but more importantly has rich sound and no distortion. Audio via the headphone dongle had solid, though not necessarily chart-topping performance, and the phone supports high-quality audio codecs for a better Bluetooth experience. It also comes with 128GB of storage, so you'll be able to download all the music and videos that you want. This makes the phone a perfect storm in terms of media consumption, all while being quite a stunner in terms of looks. The back has a camera setup reminiscent of the iPhone Xs, and it has a beautiful reflective surface. That is, until you touch it. While the ceramic material is hardy and extremely difficult to scratch, it becomes a slimy mess in seconds. Even worse, the sides are a little slippery, so I seriously recommend you use the case it comes with for better usability. The extra grip it offers also means you can more easily use the phone one-handed, and even the slide mechanism is a little easier to snap open and closed. Speaking of the slide mechanism, there are little magnets that help it snap into place, so it's a little stiffer than the Honor Magic 2s. That said, because both are sliders, they share some of the same flaws. First, it remains to be seen how they'll fare over time durability-wise. Also, there's zero water and dust protection, which leads us to question whether it's possible for stuff to get in between the two halves of the phone and scratch the glass in front of the selfie cameras. As far as biometrics go, I'm sad to say there's no face unlock. This is a little disappointing because it feels like a natural way to unlock this type of device. But at least there's a very fast and very accurate fingerprint reader on the back. On the side, there's also a Google Assistant button, which you can't reprogram for now, but is pretty easy to forget about. I mentioned earlier that the phone is unusually heavy. Well, despite that, the battery is smaller than the Mi Mix 2s, and we're seeing a huge jump in battery life. The Mi Mix 3 also supports Quick Charge 3.0 and 4.0, so the supplied charger can get the battery from 0 to 54% in 30 minutes. Unlike most phones, this one also comes with its own wireless charger, which can replenish the battery from 0 to 32% in half an hour. The Mi Mix 3 is powered by a Snapdragon 845 chipset in either 6, 8, or even 10 gigs of RAM. Although the 845 is a top-of-the-line chipset at the moment, in around a month and a half, the Snapdragon 855 will be released, and this will be slightly outdated. There have been rumors that Xiaomi is going to release an updated version to the Mi Mix 3 with 5G support and the Snapdragon 855, but those are rumors and we don't know exactly when that would happen, if it does happen. For now, all we can say is that it has superb sustained performance and you won't feel any sort of slowdown with regular use, especially since MIUI is also well optimized. The Mi Mix 3 runs MIUI 10 on top of Android Pie 9.0. This is no vanilla Android, so if you're a die-hard purist, it might not be the best device for you. However, despite the extra little tools that Xiaomi includes, it's generally quite easy to get used to. The gestures are awesome and make the phone much more usable one-handed. Once you get used to them, it becomes very difficult to go back to buttons because they seem slow and far from intuitive. The task switcher has also been updated and is easier to sort through. My biggest gripe with MIUI is the lack of an app drawer, but if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of optimization, a third-party launcher takes care of that pretty easily. It'll also take care of another problem. The theme store is region-specific, so if you don't live in one of those regions but want to tweak the vibe of your phone, you'll have to resort to Eevee or Nova, or whichever is your launcher of choice. The slider also allows for a bunch of little shortcuts if you activate them. The most classic one is answering the phone with a snap, but you can also use it to open the camera app or open up the tools menu, which has various shortcuts for different helpful apps. Sadly, you can't customize them either, and I think the first thing I would have added is Shazam for recognizing music. You can also set the slider to do nothing, so you can just fidget away. On the back, the Mi Mix 3 has a 12-megapixel main shooter with a 12-megapixel telephoto camera. In daylight, photos come out nicely detailed but with quite a bit of noise. The dynamic range is good and you can rely on Auto HDR for more difficult scenes. It fixes clip highlights with very few changes to the rest of the photo. Colors are true to life unless you use the AI camera, in which case saturation is boosted a little too much and makes photos look like they have an Instagram filter. The telephoto camera takes pretty good images in decent light. Shots are sharp and detailed with wide dynamic range and, once again, accurate colors. However, you should try to be as still as possible because sadly there's no optical image stabilization, unlike on the wider shooter. In low light, photos are sharp enough with well-preserved colors. And surprisingly, there's plenty of noise, but not so much of it that it gets in the way. If the AI is turned on, a night mode kicks in, but it's not the dedicated night mode, and the only real difference between the regular low-light images and the AI ones is color saturation. When you turn on Xiaomi's new handheld night mode, it only takes a second or two for the phone to take a picture, which is a big improvement over Huawei's 4-second wait time. Photos are much brighter than regular ones, and there's a lot more detail. There's a bit of a watercolor effect that's noticeable across the samples, but that's a common issue for this type of feature. The quality of the photos taken in portrait mode rely a lot on whether you're in a well-lit environment or not. In brighter locations, you'll get pretty good detailed portraits with excellent subject separation and convincing faux blur. Portrait lighting is also available, and you have 8 options to choose from. They're at a lower resolution than regular photos, and they're not always convincing, but when they do work, they're pretty fun. On the front, or rather in the middle, you'll also find a dual camera setup. However, this time around, you have one main 24-megapixel snapper and a 2-megapixel depth sensing one. There's more than enough detail, and colors are pleasant. Dynamic range isn't impressive, but Auto HDR should help salvage things in more extreme lighting. Selfie portraits are also quite convincing thanks to the depth sensor, but sharpness takes a hit. Portrait lighting is also available for selfies, but the effects are even less convincing. The Mi Mix 3 can capture video up to 4K at 60 FPS, and slow motion video up to 960 FPS is also available. However, for some reason, it doesn't allow you to use a telephoto lens for video, which is really irritating. 4K videos were sharp and detailed, although not class-leading. Contrast is great and color rendition is vivid without being too much. Unlike in photos, noise wasn't an issue. Despite OIS, there really isn't any stabilization with 4K videos. 1080p capture is also excellent, and here, the Mi Mix 3 actually outperforms many other competitors who ignore 1080p video optimization. Here, stabilization is actually also quite good, and we didn't observe any issues like wobbling, so you might just forego 4K capture and stick to Full HD for most use cases. The Mi Mix 3 is missing a few features. The phone feels well built and the slider feels durable, but the form factor is untested and there's no IP68 rated protection. The loudspeaker sounds decent, but it's not a stereo setup, and is far from class-leading when it comes to loudness. However, battery life is excellent, the screen is great, the camera is comparable to the likes of the Galaxy S9 and the OnePlus 6D, and at $500 it's pretty reasonably priced. This is a solid flagship that's pretty easy to recommend. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button down below and subscribe and hit the bell icon to get our latest tech reviews as soon as they're out. See you next time.